Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our final edition of Up in the Air for the month of November. I'm Ryan Breton.
And I'm Meredith Fish. Tonight we take a look at last Sunday's tornado outbreak and its impact on insurance companies and a way to predict extreme heat events in advance.
Plus, Dakota will have a look at the 8 to 14-day climate outlook, which brings us into the first week of December.
But let's get started with a look at the latest news from the Weather and Climate Enterprises. Here's this week's Update in the Air. Scientists at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder have identified a large-scale atmospheric circulation pattern above the northern hemisphere, which has potential to predict heat waves up to 3 weeks in advance. This pattern is called wave number 5 and will hopefully give cities more time to prepare for extreme heat events. With most weather events difficult to predict over 10 days in advance, if this pattern holds true, it could be very helpful for forecasters come summer. This pattern will help give advance notice to extreme heat in the United States with a sequence of 5 alternating high and low pressure centers. Hopefully, this forecasting tool will decrease the amount of lives lost to major heat events.
Last Sunday's tornado outbreak in the Midwest could cause insured losses of more than $1 billion. According to catastrophe modeling firm RMS, this would be the insurance industry's first billion-dollar weather event to ever occur in November. An analysis of the data compiled by the Tornado History Project suggests that there have only been 20 F4 tornadoes in the United States during November since 1950. There may have been 2 tornadoes that caused F4 damage in Illinois on Sunday.
The majority of the waves in our oceans are not generated by local winds, but instead distant storms producing swells. These swells affect ocean cargo shipping, offshore oil and gas production, and recreational activities like surfing. Evaluating the large storm systems in the Southern Ocean, researchers determined the rate at which these systems generate their waves and propagate outward. Many of the waves we see off the coast of Australia are produced by these swells and generally have traveled tens of thousands of kilometers. Professor Young found that, quote, typical swell is not very steep and can travel across oceanic basins with only a relatively small loss of energy. This research will hopefully better our ability to predict wave action, as 70% of the world's oceans are dominated by swell.
Natural gas futures prices fell for the first time in 3 sessions earlier this week on Monday, according to the Wall Street Journal. Investors cashed in on recent gains amid uncertainty over whether an expected cold snap, which Dakota will be talking about in the climate outlook, will extend into the rest of this month and into next month as well. Oil prices have also fallen recently, but that drop is not credit to the weather. Instead, according to the Associated Press, they have fallen ahead of negotiations in Geneva to curb Iran's nuclear program.
Most research agrees that deforesting the Amazon will cause a change in precipitation, but new research shows that the destruction of the Amazon could affect climate elsewhere. A study out of Princeton University showed that a total deforestation of the Amazon could lead to a significant decrease in rain and snowfall totals over the western United States. This could lead to a greater risk of forest fires and shortages in food and water. With the Amazon stripped bare of trees, this study showed that there would be a 50% reduction in the Sierra Nevada, which is crucial for cities and farms in California. The researchers also concluded that the Amazon would then develop a weather pattern which would be subject to Rossby waves, which move weather from one region to another. Although this is just one possible outcome, the overall message is that the deforestation in the Amazon will have repercussions worldwide.
NASA scientists say they have identified a rare weather pattern that will help meteorologists predict when California may experience periods of intense and prolonged wet weather. Bing Guan, an earth sciences researcher at UCLA and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, led a team of UCLA and NOAA scientists who found a conclusive link between the alignment of 2 weather patterns in the northern hemisphere and the jet stream. It was found when the Arctic Oscillation and the Pacific North American teleconnection align in a particular way, the result is prolonged intense weather in California. Teleconnections play a major role in weather patterns around the globe. One that we watch for weather in Pennsylvania is a North Atlantic Oscillation, which can help us project when conditions are favorable for storminess and cold weather in the winter months. That's Update in the Air for this week. We'll be back right after this with more on Up in the Air.
And welcome back to Up in the Air.
For this week's Risk Report, we're joined by Weather Risk Management Club members Kyle Jola and Graham Smith. Thanks for stopping by, guys.
Ryan and Meredith, thanks so much for having us.
Now, Typhoon Hayian has made news around the globe over the past couple of weeks. Can you tell us a bit about the storm?
Typhoon Hayian made landfall in the Philippines and Southeast Asia the week of November 7, 2013, also known as Typhoon Yolanda in the Philippines. This storm has left approximately 11,000 people affected and an estimated 4,000 dead so far. Hayian left countless homeless throughout the region due to its storm surges up to 19 feet and gusts up to 235 miles per hour. Sustained winds reached 196 miles per hour, which, if confirmed, would make Typhoon Hayian the strongest tropical cyclone to ever make landfall. Here we have a graphic constructed by the American Red Cross to show you how massive this typhoon really was. This shows a typhoon imposed over the United States.
And how did Hayian affect the Philippines' economy?
The Philippines are currently the 8th largest rice producer in the world, contributing 2.8% of the global rice production. Rice production is a large part of the Philippines' economy, so that is where the country felt its largest economic impact. The agricultural sector alone suffered approximately $158 million in losses. A third of the country's rice-producing land, roughly 313 square miles, is beyond salvage. Rice was not the only crop that sustained losses from Hayian. Coconuts, mangoes, and sugarcane, among others, were also affected by the typhoon. The agricultural sector's losses contributed to an estimated total of $14 billion in damage to the economy of the Philippines. The Philippine peso fell 0.3% against the US dollar, and the Philippines market dropped 2.2% upon opening on Monday, November 11, 2013.
Now, more than just the Philippines, the globe was affected, of course, by this storm. What kind of effect was there on the global economy?
Although it is still early and we may see long-term effects on the global economy, as of now there has been very little impact outside Southeast Asia. The typhoon narrowly avoided serious damage to the capital of the Philippines, Manila. Manila accounts for roughly one-third of the nation's annual economic output. Due to the fact that the typhoon struck in a generally impoverished region, the global impact, besides a push for aid, was not significant.
And now, what kind of effect would a storm like this have if it made landfall in the U.S.?
If we compare Hayian to Hurricane Katrina, which struck Louisiana in August 2005, then we see that the economic impact of Katrina was far greater than that of Typhoon Hayian. New Orleans is one of the largest ports in the world. Some of its exports include coffee, sugar, fruit, rubber, and petroleum. The Gulf of Mexico is home to many offshore drilling sites, which were heavily damaged by Hurricane Katrina. This caused oil prices to skyrocket. Pictured here is a comparison in size between the typhoon and the hurricane. As shown by this graphic, we can be sure that if Typhoon Hayian followed the path of Hurricane Katrina, then the damage would have been catastrophic.
Great facts on Hayian, Graham and Kyle. Thanks for joining us here on Up in the Air.
Ryan and Meredith, thanks so much for having us. It was a pleasure to be here.
Again, thank you, and Josh and Max will be here next week.
And Up in the Air will be back right after this.
Welcome back to Up in the Air. It has been a cooler than average November around much of central Pennsylvania, and Meredith, Johnstown is averaging 2.5 degrees below average so far.
It definitely has been chilly around campus too. Thanksgiving is next week, and it's one of the busiest travel weeks of the year.
Well, let's find out what the weather has in store. Dakota Smith is joining us now with the climate outlook for next week. Dakota.
Well, Ryan and Meredith, we will be seeing cooler than average conditions here in State College as well as across the entire East Coast. Much like we saw earlier this week, it is warmer now, but that December chill will roll on through and bring in some of those cooler conditions. Now, before I get into the climate outlook, we did have a pretty intense tornado outbreak we had in the Midwest. The red dots here represent tornado damage reports. The blue dots are wind damage reports, and the green dots right here are hail damage reports. Over 100 tornado damage reports in the Midwest, with a preliminary count of 16 total tornadoes. A few of which were violent EF4 tornadoes, which brought on a few fatalities with the event. So our thoughts are out with the victims that were impacted by this tornado outbreak. Now on to the climate outlook. Out here in the east, we'll see some cooler than average conditions, especially down here in the south. If you know anyone down there, tell them to bring those plants and vegetables in, as we may see a frost or freeze down here, even all the way into Austin, Texas, and out to Colorado. Now in the west, if you're trying to get away, trying to plan a vacation, above normal temperatures out here across the entire west coast in California into the Pacific Northwest. Now, along with those cooler conditions we'll be seeing out here, wetter than average conditions. So we may be seeing a few systems bringing some precipitation, snow or rain. It's this time of the year, you never know. That extends all the way down to Maine, down to Florida. Luckily, out here where we saw those tornado damage, it's going to be a little drier than what we usually expect, so hopefully that helps with some of the recovery efforts out there. Now again, trying to use some of those airplane points, drier than average conditions out here if you're trying to lay out on the beach, soak in some of that sun. That extends all the way into Colorado, into the Rocky Mountains, so that snowpack may not be developing as fast as they'd like at some of the ski resorts. And then we have a nice little swath of above normal precipitation in the Pacific Northwest and Dakotas and Minnesota. So I hope you got a little look at what to expect across the country for the next week or so. Up next on Up in the Air, we'll have a Meteorology Minute.
Weather sticks its head into everyone's business on a daily basis. Meteorologists spend a lot of time analyzing and predicting the weather. If you are a meteorologist, or if you know of any meteorologists, there is a good chance that they are a member of the American Meteorological Society, or AMS. Founded in 1919, the AMS now includes over 14,000 professionals, students, and weather enthusiasts from across the country. The main goal of the AMS is to promote the advancement of atmospheric science and the related fields of hydrology and oceanography. As you probably saw in a previous episode of Up in the Air, the weather enterprise in the United States is unique in that it is made up of 3 separate sectors, including the academic sector, the public sector, and the private sector. The question remains, how has the weather enterprise in the United States been so successful and competitive with this separation in place?
The answer to that question is good communication. Stemming from recommendations in the Fair Weather Report, the American Meteorological Society serves as a neutral host for meetings between the sectors. The AMS provides a venue where meteorologists working across the field can discuss issues in the enterprise. The AMS holds a meeting once per year, and meteorologists from across the country come together at a sort of meteorological Thanksgiving dinner. A major player at these meetings is the Commission on the Weather and Climate Enterprise, or CWCE. The CWCE is responsible for considering all 3 sectors and making decisions about how the enterprise moves forward. The Commission is composed of several different committees, including the Steering Committee, the Board on Enterprise Planning, and the Board on Enterprise Economic Development, to name a few. The annual meeting allows the Commission to get the most up-to-date information on topics such as improving weather observations, climate change, and wind energy. They use this information to make decisions on which areas to pursue first and going forward, and then make recommendations. The Commission is not limited to making recommendations, however. They also perform services such as writing journal articles for the AMS, organizing town hall meetings in places of interest, and reporting to news media on weather topics. The next AMS meeting is set to be held in Atlanta, Georgia at the beginning of February in 2014. For Up in the Air, I'm Travis Patterson.
And I'm Joel Maruschak.
Well, Meredith, another action-packed episode of Up in the Air is coming to a close tonight. We'd like to thank Graham Smith and Kyle Jola for being here with this week's Weather Risk Report.
And next week, there will be no show due to the Thanksgiving holiday. However, we hope you'll join us in 2 weeks for our next episode. We'll be joined by members of our TV production class with reports on a variety of topics.
Definitely looking forward to that, and we hope that you have a restful and very happy Thanksgiving. I'm Ryan Breton.
And I'm Meredith Fish. Join us next time, Up in the Air.